Hello, my name is Chrissy Hodges. Thank you for joining me. If you're joining my video now, or if you are on my YouTube channel, which this video will go on a little bit later. I'm gonna pull this a little bit closer. My name is Chrissy Hodges. I am a certified peer support specialist in the state of Colorado. I work with individuals worldwide to support them, but also to connect people to referrals for OCD specialists, experts that know what OCD actually is and how to treat it effectively with evidence-based therapy and resources that can help people along the way with their journey. I'm also the author of Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about Pure OCD is a nickname for OCD. It is OCD, but it's a nickname for the community of people who live with disturbing, intrusive thoughts. They can be sexual, violent, blasphemous, relationship-oriented health, but primarily we're dealing with mental rituals. So most of that's going on in your head. So people can be living with this, and they're sitting next to you, or you live with them, or they're at your work, and you wouldn't even ever know that this person is tormented every day. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sexual and violent intrusive thoughts. And you're probably thinking, don't you always talk about this? Don't you ever talk about anything else? Well, not really. But I do have a lot of videos about this on my YouTube channel, and the reason why is because it's so important, and it's also so common when it comes to living with OCD. And the problem is that people will live with sexual, violent, blasphemous, intrusive thoughts for years and years and years and have no clue it's OCD. They'll have no clue it's a diagnosable illness that you can get effective treatment for and live a normal, productive, everyday life. For me, I lived for 12 years and had no idea that I had OCD because I always thought OCD was hand washing and organizing. Now, that is a huge component of OCD as well, but I want to drive it home here. Sexual and violent intrusive thoughts are very, very common. They're way more common than you would ever imagine when it comes to OCD. So I was at the International OCD Foundation Annual Conference this last weekend. I go every year, and I just cannot tell you the hordes of people that I talk to who live with sexual, violent, intrusive thoughts are too terrified to talk to anybody about it. They go to the conference to help feel normalized, and then typically go back into their world where they can't talk about it. They aren't able, they can share and are capable of sharing it, but it's so shameful and it's so embarrassing. And so a lot of times people end up spending exorbitant amount of time alone in their head with their thoughts. So, and I also hear about the stories, and this was also for me, of people living for so long with this type of OCD before seeking help or before even knowing what it is. So I don't care how many videos I have to do about this. The word needs to get out because people really need to see that, number one, they're not alone. Number two, what it actually is. And number three, help is available. So I am going to talk about peer support because I'm starting a little series where I'm going to do several videos over the next couple months and talk about what peer support is and what it is. And I'm going to bring on some people, some clinicians that can talk about the clinical benefit of working with a peer specialist. But I'm going to tell you about that here in a few minutes. I just want to touch on sexual and violent intrusive thoughts just first. Now, if you've seen all my other videos, you're like, I don't even know what else you can say about this. But, you know, again, there's always room for more talk about this because people do feel very alone. So a couple of the things that I wanted to touch on today. First of all, the shame and the guilt of living with this type of OCD is so very real. And I don't want to say that it's worse than any other type of OCD, but I will tell you there is an added layer of shame when it comes to sexual, violent, intrusive thoughts, especially some of the taboo ones, like fear of turning into a pedophile, the fear of harming someone. Those kind of taboo intrusive thoughts are terrifying and also add that extra layer of shame. What if I tell somebody and they believe that these are real and I really don't have OCD? Which and then also accompanies the fear that most of us have, that is, what if I really don't have OCD and these fears are real? Or what if I go into therapy and therapy proves that the fears are real, so I would be willing to risk not getting therapy and just stay comfortable in my compulsions, which is not comfortable, by the way. And they're horrible and the cycle's horrible, but you do have to be really ready to go in and do the behavioral changes that you do in exposure response prevention in order to get better. I do want you to know that therapy works. Therapy is wonderful. And there are a lot of books out there that you can get as well if right now you're not in the position for therapy. Freedom from Obsessive Compulsive Disorder by Jonathan Grayson. Mindfulness Workbook for OCD by John Hirschfield. Jonathan Abramowitz has one. I think it's like Stop Obsessions and Compulsions. I don't know. But just look him up. You'll see it. It's a workbook. 10-step workbook. So there's all kinds of things that you can start doing if right now therapy isn't in the wheelhouse of what you're capable of doing. But today I wanted to talk a little bit more about sexual violent intrusive thoughts. If you don't know, or if you're on this video looking, I don't want to say reassurance, but I know that people watch the videos for reassurance. I discourage it, but I also know sometimes you're desperate and you just need to know you're not alone. But just to know that you are not alone, and that many people, many worldwide suffer with this type of OCD. So, okay, what does it feel like to have sexual, violent, intrusive thoughts? It feels like crap. That's the bottom line. It feels so miserable. It is like being stuck at, when I was going through it, I really did feel like it was like being stuck with a monster or a demon in my head that was always telling me things that I knew weren't aligned with who I was or what I wanted or what I desired, but I just wouldn't stop. So I would often describe it to people once I didn't know I had OCD until after a suicide attempt, actually, in hospitalization. But when I could describe it to people, I often thought, there is Chrissy that you see every day and that I feel like I am. And then there's this thing that comes and takes over, almost like this cloud descending over me. And all of a sudden it completely, takes over my brain, and I can't do anything else but think about what if this and what if that, and I need proof, and I'm checking and I'm this and that. And my brain really makes me believe I am in trouble. I am in danger. And if you don't figure this out right now, something bad is going to happen, or I'm going to be forced to live a life that isn't congruent than the Chrissy standing right here. So the level of urgency that comes over us when we're triggered with these sexual, violent, intrusive thoughts, it just feels like a fire underneath us. We've got to know the answer or else. Now, I want you to keep in mind, because our rituals are mental, again, so many of us put this facade on to the rest of the world. I mean, I could be having intrusive thoughts right now. I actually am. I'm not going to disclose them. But, that you're having intrusive thoughts, but you can portray yourself to the world as, look, I got everything together. Look at me. Everything looks great. And oftentimes that's what we want to project to the world, because we don't want people to know what's really going on in our brains when we think, I'm just a monster for thinking this stuff. That also creates another horrible, shameful piece. And for me, it was very, very prevalent. When I was living with this for 12 years and I didn't know what it was, I thought, people don't really know me. They don't know anything about me, because they don't know that, at times 90% of my day is spent spinning in a spin cycle trying to figure out what these awful thoughts are. And if they knew, they wouldn't want anything to do with me. So oftentimes we feel not only isolated by the thoughts, not only isolated because we're judging ourselves for the thoughts, but we also feel isolated because there's a lack of connectedness that we feel to other people, because we think they don't even know who I am. And OCD, violent, sexual, blasphemous, intrusive thoughts, it makes you feel like you don't know who you are. It makes you feel like, what if I can't trust myself? I'm getting urges. When you have violent, intrusive thoughts, often you get urges and you're like, what if I lose control and I pick up a knife and I hurt the person sitting next to me? And you can physically feel it. Your hands start to sweat. Sometimes I feel a pull and I'm like, no, let me sit on my hands, which is a compulsion I know and I shouldn't do. But in the moment, sometimes you just can't help yourself. I'm not going to risk putting my hand on a knife, when I'm at a conference table with people. But So when you're feeling that, but then especially when you have the sexual intrusive thoughts, and all of a sudden you're trying to manage the thoughts and you look at something that triggers you and your groin moves and it mimics arousal, and you think, oh my gosh, that just proves something. And you are just trying to portray to the world what's really going on, the face to the world, when all of this stuff is going on in your brain and you really just feel like, I'm just slipping down the rope. I'm slipping down the rope and I'm going to fall into this deep hole that I'm never going to get out of. So do compulsion after compulsion just to survive. And that is what most of us do until we find out we have OCD, until we get the proper treatment. We just survive. So common violent sexual intrusive thoughts, and this, there's no limit to what they can be. Oftentimes people will say, I have this thought and I bet nobody else has it. No, people have them. I mean, people, trust me, you are not alone in a thought that you might think I'm the only one or no one's going to understand. Oh yeah, they will. And I want to also reiterate, and this is always a good point, is that the themes don't matter, even though I know to you, you're thinking, oh yeah, they do. The themes matter because, hey, I can't just face myself in the mirror if I'm worried I'm going to turn into a pedophile. I don't want to see my face. I can't face the fact that that's a possibility. So you are going to think, no, the themes do matter and it's a reflection, but I'm telling you, it's OCD. You're not just battling the thoughts, you're battling OCD. And that's what you want to heal from. You're not healing from thoughts, even though I will say, and I'll get into this a little bit later, you do have to heal from, I did, and I can't say you, but I did have to heal from the shame of having the thoughts, the shame of what kind of person am I to think this? Why did this thing latch on? What does that mean about me? All that stuff, I had to take it and compartmentalize it while I was in therapy. And then later on really had to process and deal with those heavy emotions and the shame, guilt, and embarrassment that came along with the theme of the thoughts. But again, I want to emphasize, when you're getting therapy and you're getting treatment for OCD, you're getting treatment for OCD. The themes don't matter. And I know a lot of times we always think to ourselves, oh, if I only had this one. I can't tell you how many people say to me, like, because I get triggered by vomit. It's my earliest fear since I was 8. And people say, oh, that's nothing. That's not a hard fear. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you just wait until you get triggered by it and then you come back and talk to me. And then we'll talk about how it's nothing. Because anxiety is anxiety. It doesn't matter. Yes, there could be varying degrees of shame, but anxiety sucks all around. And I try to say that all the time. It doesn't matter what the theme is. They all suck. So just to give you some idea of what people live with, and I'm talking 24/7. 24/7, people will get an obsession in their head, and it is all they think about. It is all consuming, and everywhere they look, they're like, I see this, I see that. I mean, people will often say, it's not funny, but it is funny because I just hear it so much, is that people will say to me, I've been, I'm just going to stick with the theme of pedophilia because it is one of the most common that I see when I'm working with individuals with peer support. So people will say, before the onset of the pedophilia fear, which is a fear versus desire, by the way, they'll say, I never even noticed when kids are around. And now all of a sudden, everywhere I go, I'm like spotting kids everywhere. There's 5 kids over here. Before you even walk in the room, I know kids are going to be there. And they think it's a sign. When I had HOC, which is the fear of turning gay, which is not homophobia, by the way. I was not homophobic, and I'm not now. It just was this, what if I turn gay, or did I turn gay, which is a very common OCD fear as well. Before it hit, I mean, I never noticed a pair of boobs ever. And then the next thing I knew, there are boobs everywhere. Like you can't get away from them. I would look at a rock and be like, I think that's a boob. I mean, it's just awful. So it's all of a sudden on your radar, which I've mentioned in another video. But with that said, I just want to talk about some of the really, really common ones, although, like I said, I'm probably going to miss some of them, and doesn't mean yours isn't common either. So typically, HOC is the fear of turning gay. Again, not homophobia, but the fear of what if I do. Oftentimes it's fueled by stories of people, or people just all of a sudden have a thought, or it's fueled by a story by saying, you know, well, I was straight for X amount of years and then I came out of the closet, and people think, oh my gosh, could that happen to me? And so they feel like, well, am I living a lie, and am I really just in denial? Is this really how it happens when someone's coming out of the closet? So that's a really common one. The fear of turning into a pedophile, hugely common, hugely shameful. And I think the thing that scares me the most about this fear is that people are so terrified to type into the computer, I'm having pedophile thoughts, or am I a pedophile, that they miss the opportunity to find out that this is OCD and that you can get treatment for it. And that's what, it devastates me and just, it terrifies me. How many people are out there right now suffering, and how do we get to them? And how do we say, this is OCD and you can get treatment? So the violent intrusive thoughts, I mean, this can be anything from fear of poisoning your family, fear of poisoning yourself, poisoning others, fear of losing control and hurting someone. Oftentimes, if you see a news story about a mother who snapped and kills her kids, then all of a sudden it's, oh my gosh, if it could happen to her, what if that happens to me? Or anything that has to do with hurting your family, hurting your friends, hurting your spouse. Oftentimes people will think, well, what if I go to sleep and I sleepwalk and I hurt somebody? Those damn stories they have on 2020 about that, and it just sends everybody into a spiral. Anytime there's a mass shooting, I know people get very triggered with violent intrusive thoughts. They're, what if I snap and that happens to me? What if I can't control myself? I have these urges. So violence in the car is always really a huge one. What if I swerve and hit somebody? What if I'm going to use my car to kill people? Oftentimes I'll have one of, I'll see an intersection coming up and I think, what if I not accidentally, but what if I just choose to put my foot on the gas instead of the brake and I slam into all these cars and I kill everybody? And so then, sorry, compulsion again, but sometimes I will put my foot on both feet on the brake just to make sure. And then I think you should not be doing a compulsion, but right now I can't help it. And then we've got, people fearing, they have sexual intrusive thoughts about people who have died. So they think, oh my gosh, my mother or my dad died. I just had a sexual intrusive thought about them. I can't stop thinking about it, and so it makes the guilt and the shame is so bad about it because they think, I don't know what I can even do at this point. And it's disgracing the dead and things like that. Incest, fear of incest. So, feeling like, what if I have feelings towards a family member? Very, very common. The fear of, what if I rape somebody, or what if I've been raped? What if I turn into a cannibal? What if, and then I wanted to talk about this one. So there's so many more, just so you know. Scrupulosity comes in, has to do with when religion gets involved in it. So, what if I'm sexually attracted to a religious figure? What if I have sexual thoughts about God? So oftentimes people will be reading something, if they have this, and they'll see the word Jesus or God, and they may get a groinal, like their groin moves, like they're aroused, and they'll think, oh my gosh, am I sexually attracted because I just saw this word and now my groin moved? And so there are no limits to what OCD is going to do to keep you stuck in that cycle. And so you often feel so ashamed of, like, I'm not going to go to a therapist and sit down and tell them that I feel like, I got an erection when I looked at the word Jesus, because there's such an added layer of shame. Number one, of I can't believe that happened and what kind of person am I to do that? But number two, what if they don't believe me? Or what if I am some twisted, person that really thinks that? So these are all the things that keep people from talking about it. Another big one is the fear of suicide. What if I lose control and kill myself? And this is a really common one. Also, what if the health OCD? So what if I develop schizophrenia? And again, not that there's anything wrong with having schizophrenia, but it just is a fear of HIV. So we could go down all this, but I really want to talk about one in particular. And I have done some research on it, and I don't see a lot of out there about it, and I think it's really bad that there isn't, and I wish that there was more, and hopefully there will be in the future. But it is the transgender theme with the pure OCD. So this is, what if I am transgender? Again, not that there's anything wrong with it. And most people that I meet with that have this fear, they are like, I have nothing against transgender. I just don't feel like I am, like if it was me saying it, that I am a man. But you get a thought caught in your head the same way that you would with, what if I turn gay? I know I'm not gay, But then all of a sudden I have this thought of, well, what if I am? And oh my gosh, I just looked at that person's boob. That must mean something, you know? And so when people have the transgender, all of a sudden they get an intrusive thought of, what if I really am, if it's a male, what if I really am a woman? And so some of the things that people will do with this, and I will say that of course it's going to be coming up recently because there's a lot of stuff in the media about transgender. There's often, you know, personal stories coming out, which I think is so wonderful to help normalize individuals that are transgender. However, with OCD, it just triggers things off the rails because people will read the stories and go, well, they said that they had anxiety about coming out as transgender, and I have anxiety. Does that mean that that's the first step? And I am anxious because now I know, because I never felt this way before, and they start analyzing, or they may look in their past and go, well, like if it was a woman, like, well, I am a woman. If I am a woman, almost said if I was a woman, and I had transgender, I would think back and go, well, I was a tomboy growing up. So what if that really was the fact that I was supposed to be male, and I just conformed to society and started wearing dresses and makeup when really I am a man. And so this is what happens, and things can be triggering like you wouldn't believe, just like any other thing, which would be, you know, you're looking at a bathroom and all of a sudden you see female and you see male and you go, well, I'm going to go into the female bathroom because I'm a female. And then it's like, wait a minute. Why would I even think that? Does that mean that I shouldn't go into that bathroom? Because if I did think that, that must mean there's some truth and I really am a male. But what if I go in there? I can't go in there, but then I'm going to go in there and then I'm a liar because I'm going to be in there and I'm really a male with all these females and I'm just lying to everybody saying that I'm a female. Does that make sense? So other than that, you know, there's the testing oneself. So you try to imagine yourself. So if I was having the transgender theme, then I would imagine myself, okay, let me think of myself as a male. Okay, so do I want to wear the male clothes? Would I feel comfortable being do I want to do things that males generally do? Then you may get obsessed with your appearances. So I may go, well, you know, my shoulders get a little broad. And so I wonder if that really means that I should have been a man. When I had HOCD really bad, I did go back and forth and think, well, what if I really am a man? And I'm just coming out as my natural person really wanting women. Okay, OCD can take you down a rabbit hole. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, my voice is really low compared to all my friends. So I wonder if I really have an Adam's apple. And so I'm thinking to myself, I need to go get x-rayed to see if I really do have an Adam's apple. That really means that I'm a male. I mean, so it just can get so convoluted because if you're always looking for proof or disproof, you're always going to find something that can support whatever your brain is looking to alarm you against or toward or whatever, because that is the cycle. So anyway, I just wanted to mention the transgender theme because it isn't talked about a lot, but I do want to tell you that it is not uncommon. And especially now where, you know, it's really becoming prevalent in news. And so we see things about it a lot. And oftentimes people get triggered and they're really scared to tell somebody that they're having this fear. Number one, it feels like you're being discriminatory and that you're saying being transgender is wrong, which you're not. It's a fear. It doesn't mean that you're against it. But secondly, people are too afraid to come out with it because they are afraid that it will be labeled as gender dysphoria, or that if they go to the wrong therapist, the therapist might say, well, maybe maybe you're just beginning to realize this. And people don't want to hear that because they know that because OCD is ego dystonic, you know it's not aligned with what you want and desire, but you can't stop thinking about it. So I just wanted to assure you that you are not alone in going to an OCD expert. And someone who treats this will absolutely understand what you're going through and be able to structure some therapy around that particular fear. So anyway, I'm going to move along to peer support. So I started doing peer support several years ago for one reason and one reason only. I wanted to support people in the emotional piece of OCD. Because OCD is physical. We all know this. It affects our brains and we do physical or mental compulsion. So this is a physical thing, but emotionally, it is so traumatizing and devastating for people. And I struggled for so many years with the emotional component, the shame, the guilt, the sadness, the anger, all of that at the hands of living with OCD for so long. And then even getting treatment and moving forward and feeling like I didn't have a place in the world. I didn't trust my brain. I didn't know who I was. So I wanted to get into peer support to meet people where they were at and to start helping people understand they're not alone. And selfishly, I kind of wanted to meet people anyway so I could heal some from my own trauma that I had experienced from it, which has been very beneficial. But I wanted to bring up peer support for a couple reasons. Number one, there are a lot of people that write to me and ask me about it. And so I wanted to talk about what I suggest. So, well, actually, I'm going to do a video on what peer support is and what it isn't later. But just really quickly, peer support is not therapy. We do not give advice. We give 100% support, and it is supplemental to therapy, or it's supplemental. If you're not in therapy, I can still provide peer support to you, but I am not going to provide therapy. And so I'll get into that in a later video. So I got into peer support. I was certified through the state of Colorado. I have a lot of experience in the institutes here, as well as working in the community. And then I branched off on my own to work specifically with OCD because I saw that there was a need. Now, when you are looking for someone in a supplementary role to help with your recovery, or if you are looking for a therapist, number one, please make sure that your therapist is licensed. And please make sure that your therapist is a therapist, a social worker, somebody that is licensed in their field, working toward their licensure. They have their graduate degree and they're being supervised. There are a lot of people out there that say that they do therapy and that they have programs that work to treat OCD. No. If they're not someone that is doing evidence-based therapy and they don't have the credentials behind their name, please don't exchange money with them. I mean, I hate to say it as blunt as I am, but it's people taking advantage of people that really need help. So ask for their credentials. If they say they have some random program that works and they have a whatever percentage rate that works, don't trust it. If they're not a therapist, if they're not being supervised, if they don't have the credentials behind their name, please don't waste your money. Don't waste your time. You could get a lot worse. If you are looking for supplementary help, I will say I'm not a support of anybody that does not have training or supervision, and most people who are certified peer supports would say the same thing. We go through a lot of training, we go through continued education, and we also are certified by people that know what we're doing and can hold us accountable to our scope of practice. Please don't exchange money with people who don't have appropriate training to help with OCD. I mean, you can, but you're really risking it. People who often don't take into account that they actually need to understand what they're doing to support people can really put people in a dangerous spot. Yes, you can have OCD and you can understand it 100%, and you can think, I want to give back and I want to support somebody, but OCD just isn't always about OCD. It's about substance use, it's about addiction, it can be comorbid disorders, and if you are not trained and supervised to understand that, you are putting people at risk. And we want you to get better, so it is okay to ask people, if you are exchanging money with somebody, what are your credentials? Are you certified? Do you have a supervisor? Please keep that in mind. Your recovery is important. You don't want to waste time with people that could potentially make things worse for you. So with that said, the benefit of peer support is this. And there are a lot of benefits, but I just wanted to say that for me, I received peer support, I would say 4 or 5 years ago. And it was so healing for me, and the normalization of what I went through, not only the symptoms, but the emotional turmoil. So if you work with a peer supporter, so if you were to work with me, Shannon Shai is also another person who does peer support for OCD. He's at overcomingocd.net. He's wonderful. So if you would prefer to work with a man, or if his style is, better, whatever, please, by all means, I 100% endorse him. Peer support is where someone comes and meets you where you're at. wherever that is in recovery, even if it's at the baby stages you haven't even begun. Sometimes peer support can be beneficial in helping to get you to a position where you're ready for therapy. It can help while you're in therapy, and it can help after therapy. Again, all it is normalizing the experience by us using our own lived experience. We don't give advice. We don't cross over into any therapeutic boundaries, and that's why we're supervised, so we can make sure that we don't do those things. I do want to say, I often get emails from people, or when I meet with people, they say, I was going to reach out to you 6 months ago or whatever, but I didn't want to because I was scared of what you were going to say. Okay, so it is not in my scope of practice, by the way, for us to meet. A fly just went by, if you saw that. I hope it doesn't land in my hair. It is not within my scope of practice, A, to diagnose you. I don't do that. And B, to tell you you do or don't have OCD. First of all, that would be reassurance. And second of all, that is out of my range. What I can do is listen to your story. I can share with you what I've been through and help normalize where you are, help normalize the suffering, the symptoms, and the emotions. Because let's face it, it's lonely. And when you talk to somebody that just gets it, it can start a healing process, and that's what it did for me. So I do want you to know also, anything, I am bound by HIPAA confidentiality here in the States. If you don't know that, in other states it is confidentiality. So I could get in some pretty big trouble if I talked about anything that we talked about in a session. So I do understand with OCD, it's really terrifying to think, I don't want to just tell somebody all my secrets. But confidentiality is a big deal when it comes to peer support. We are bound to the same standards as therapists. So if that is standing in your way of getting peer support or doing a referral consultation, I just want you to know, Shannon Shai and I, practicing peer support, or any other person practicing that's certified, we're all on the same page, and we take it very seriously, and we take meeting you where you're at very seriously when it comes to peer support. So that's really all that I wanted to say today. I am going to do a series of videos over the next couple months, also talking about themes of OCD, kind of like I did today with the transgender theme. But just to give you a little bit more information. Now, I want you to understand, this is not a plug for my business. It may feel like that, but there has just been some rising concerns as of late of people not understanding what peer support is, and people also claiming to do peer support and looking for exchanging money when they have zero certification and training. As this is an up and coming field, I definitely wanted to let people know and put some educational piece out there of what it really is and what it isn't. And maybe it's right for you and maybe it's not, and that's okay too. But just so you can have an idea of what to look for when you are looking for a peer support specialist. So with that said, I hope this video was informational for you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video, which is going to be what is peer support and what isn't. Now, I am hoping I can get Shannon Shai on here. He is out of the country for a while, but fingers crossed, I can get him to come on and we can do an interview with him, and then we can talk peer support shop together. So anyway, thank you for being here as always. I just want you to know that you are not alone. Recovery is possible and that there is hope. Oh, and follow me on Instagram at PureOChristy. I post everything and anything mental health, and sometimes about my tomatoes like I did today. Bye.